I work at a homeless shelter for men in a fairly large Midwestern city. It's rewarding work, but the pay isn't great. Listening to these guys' stories and experiences leaves me feeling incredibly grateful and humble. Many are mentally ill, addicted, alcoholic, or some combination of the three. A few are truly men who are down on their luck, victims of other people's mistakes, but it's pretty rare. Generally speaking, almost all are local, as there is literally nothing to bring you to this city besides either work or family. Which brings me to Carl. He creeped me out from the beginning. He's not from here. In fact, he's from the West Coast, which is easily a 2-day drive. He's an outdoorsy type with a kayak on top of his SUV. This made me suspicious. Why would somebody who loved the outdoors leave the West to come here? He is never drunk or high, he's perfectly well spoken, and no obvious mental problems like so many of his fellow residents. His backstory makes no sense. They rarely do here. He was yet another extremely rich and successful man who got screwed in some vague and never believable way and ended up homeless. In fact, the residents here are all misunderstood geniuses, musicians, brilliant salesmen, former athletes that should have made it pro, and so on. And they all got screwed by something or someone. It's all BS stories, and his is no different. But Carl, though, is different. Well-spoken, worldly, extremely polite and educated. So why is he here? Is he on the run? We don't allow the police to come in looking for anyone unless we call them ourselves. It's a perfect place to hide for someone running from something. So he's from out of state with some weird story of how he ended up here. I gave up the rat rave, packed up, and this is where I ran out of money. Yeah, sure, bud. He's trying to befriend me, which it creeps me out. Anyway, I caught him alone by the dumpsters yesterday. He was shirtless on a map, looking like he was praying or something and doing yoga deep in thought. His tattoos seemed off too. They resembled a goat head guy on a man's body with something written in Latin. When he noticed me, he grabbed something quickly and he put it into his pocket. I have no idea what it was. I told him that he couldn't come back here and he complied. He was also chanting something that I couldn't make out before he noticed me. Something about blood. Very creepy and very scary. He hasn't done anything wrong per se, and we can't kick someone out for being creepy or practicing their religion. Oh well, another day at the shelter. When I was 7 or 8, my family went to the beach and rented a room. We had the kind of rooms where you rent out both and they connect through a door. Like there's the doors to leave the room, and the doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there was this army family, a military dad, some kids, and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me, as we were down at the jacuzzi during the evening. As we were playing and hanging out and just having a good time. I didn't get out much. I was naive and all around a little kid. And this mom literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She starts talking to us and just making herself real comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually, we started talking books and she's talking about her kids, who were never even seen. And we're just having a good conversation. Really in depth, I felt like. My sister decides that she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I wanted to stay and talk with the mom. So, my sister goes back to the room and now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have set off some creepy alerts, but it didn't. So, she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's like 10 p.m. and she wants to go walk on the beach and get shells. And being a kid, I thought it was a great idea. I'd get to walk on the beach at night. I felt so free and like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or anything. So, I run back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to what I said. She just shooed me off. It's important to know that I didn't live with my parents. So, I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. Really, it was a dark, dim stairwell at a cheap motel on the beach. So, I'm going through the stairwell like something out of a movie. Too bad, I've never seen this movie. So, I'm walking through the stairwell. The mom's way at the bottom telling me to hurry up and this and that. While walking through the stairs, the army dad comes running hauling butt to where I'm at. And he told me, "Your mom is calling you. It's really important, we gotta go." And he basically grabbed me by my wrist, softly, not aggressively, and led me back to our room. He knocked on the door and explained what had happened. I never thought much of it until about a year ago when it came back to me. This woman was leading me away to the beach alone at night, and this army guy had a terrible feeling in his gut, so we intervened. When he said my mom was looking for me, as I don't live with my mom, it set off some alarms in my head. It's when I realized something was up. So I didn't resist going back to my family. As a kid, I knew since he was saying my mom wanted me that it was important. I just knew something was up because I don't live with my mom. I'm now 20 years old and I truly believe that mom was trying to lure me away to do God knows what. And this army dude had a bad feeling and saved my life. Thinking back, I get such a bad feeling all throughout my body. I know now I wouldn't have made it back from that beach trip. Thank you, army dude. Your gut feeling and having a watchful eye saved something terrible from happening. That woman was creepy, and I never saw her kids. This happened on a beach in the Philippines about 2 years ago. Me and my friends decided to take a quick vacation to let off some steam from work. On our first night, we decided to drink just outside of our hotel room. We got a little tipsy and one of my friends decided to take a walk on the beach to try to meet some other tourists here. I had a bad feeling about what might happen to him since he was already drunk, so I decided to join him together with another friend. He said that he wanted to visit the rock formations, which was a known hookup spot since the place was dark, and there was no other establishment on that part of the shoreline. It stretches to about half the length of a football court with pure darkness. I was reluctant about the idea of him going, but he was adamant, so I agreed as long as he comes back after a few minutes. Me and my other friend waited on the last bar on the end of the shoreline before the dark area starts. Me and my friend were talking about something when we heard a gut-wrenching scream. It sounded like our friend, so we decided to rush in. The only light at that time is coming from the moon, so my friend decided to pull out his phone and turn on the flashlight. We asked around and saw some people hooking up on the sand. We asked if they saw our friend, giving them descriptions on what he might look like, but they said that they never saw him. Our hearts were pounding at this point because we don't know what might have happened to him. We ran until we reached the end of it. There was a huge rock on the shore about 15 feet tall with a local guy standing on top of it. We asked him, "Have you seen our friend?" He was about my height wearing a black shirt. He said, "Was he gay?" I didn't see the relevance of that question, but I said yes. Well, he might have went there in the mangroves, and then pointed to a darker part of the beach filled with mangroves. Using only the light on the phone, we tried searching the small area. It looks like a tiny shelter with the overgrown plants acting as the roof. When we turned back, the guy on the top of the rock is already walking towards us. And then 2 more guys popped up behind him, probably hiding behind a huge rock. "He wasn't there," I said. And then the guy who was on the rock did a karate chop on my friend's arm, making him let go of his phone, which was successful, as the phone rolled in the sand. My friend was able to grab the phone, and that's when he shouted, "Run!" I was confused with what just happened, that I just started running after he said run, without actually knowing what we were running for. And that's when it hit me that it was an ambush, that we were led into the mangroves for them to steal my friend's phone. I was running for a few seconds when I started feeling the weight on my feet. The sandals that I was wearing got really heavy because I wasn't aware I had been running on wet sand. My friend took off his flip-flops for him to run faster. I wanted to do the same, but I then realized my sandals were strap-on, so I just continued running. I could hear the guys chasing us saying, "Hey, stop, we're just joking." I don't want to fall for what they said, so I continue running, and my legs are starting to feel numb since I'm not really an athletic person. There came a point where I wanted to just stop since I didn't have anything valuable with me. But then I thought that could be a reason for them to harm me, so I ran with all my might till we got to the first bar. My friend was already there catching his breath when we saw the friend that we were looking for, laughing and talking to the locals. We wanted to punch him for what he put us through, but he had no idea what just happened, so we let it go. Our vacation still went through, and we still go to that island from time to time, but we vowed to never go to that side of the beach ever again. Now, that part of the beach has already been closed to tourists. So, to those guys who tried to mug us on the beach, please, let's not meet. And one other thing, my friend said he wasn't the one who screamed, but it sounded like him. If it wasn't him, then who was it? This happened over a decade ago, but I only recently found this sub and I think it's a good fit. It was Halloween of 2008. I was in college and still in a relationship with my first serious boyfriend. We had been together since high school, and it took this night to show me our relationship was abusive. It took one more incident before I finally left him for good. He was wonderful when sober, if intense and controlling, but when he was drunk, I learned that he was truly terrifying. This was the first such incident that truly scared me. He had joined in a stupid game, a Gatorade and Shine challenge. They would empty a bottle of Gatorade at least halfway, fill the rest up with moonshine. The goal was to finish the bottle within an hour and to have them tell crazy stories. When he completed the challenge, but he never did tell his friends the story. He couldn't remember most of it, and it painted him in a horrific light. He knew things were heading downhill when he started calling me bad names, after saying hi to a guy friend at a party that we were at. I decided that we had better head home before he got any worse. I thought that I could nip it in the bud and manage it. We got home and changed out of our costumes. James wanted to have sex, but in his state, and after what he had called me, I wasn't interested. Oddly enough, it led to him calling me more names. I left the apartment to go smoke. Our neighbors were having a party and 2 guys were outside smoking as well. They came over to see if I was okay. I had been crying and they had heard the yelling. I said I was, which they could obviously see was a lie. They let me know if I needed help, that they would help me. And James chose that moment to come outside. Said that he had heard us and told them to get away from me, stalking towards them. I stood up to get between them. They told me that they had meant what they said and to not forget it, and then told him to watch himself. I was facing them to say bye and thanks for the other when one of the guys gasped, staring at my boyfriend in shock. I turned around and my eyes immediately caught on the ground. Just as what I was seeing registered, the other guy lunged forward and grabbed me, pulling me behind him. What was on the ground that had elicited such reactions, you might ask? Blood. Blood was dripping on the ground from his hand. He was holding a knife so tightly that he had sliced his own hand open. I begged him to drop it, which he only agreed to when I walked back towards him. I was an idiot, I know. The two guys seemed at a loss, and I feel so bad for them having their Halloween ruined by this scary, crazy stuff. They left me to it after I swore that I'd be fine, reiterating that I could come to them for help. We got inside, and I immediately started hiding all the sharp objects, calling James' roommates begging that they come home. He started screaming at me to give him the knives back, how I was horrible and I wouldn't even have sex with him. What use was I? I called my parents and left, and then called his mom because I was scared that he would hurt himself. She let me know that he was my problem now. I should have called the police, but I didn't want to ruin his life. I know. I'm ashamed to say that I got back together with him for 6 more months of hell after that. But today I can safely say, James, please, let's not meet again. Ever again. This took place a while ago. I was 13 and my family had just moved to a new town. A new friend of mine from school and I made plans to go trick-or-treating together. At the time, I remember thinking I was a bit too old to still be trick-or-treating, but who doesn't want free candy? My friend and I figured that we still had 1 year of trick-or-treating left in us. Because we were 13 and lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, my parents thought that it was fine for us to trick-or-treat together without adult supervision. Everything was going great and we were having fun, getting some solid candy, etc. And then we rang on one guy's doorbell. The porch light was on and there was a pumpkin or two, so we figured the people in the house were likely to be handing out candy. A middle-aged man opened the door. At first, I was glad because he was dressed in costume, and happy to see my friend and me, so I felt that we were on for some top-tier candy. I don't even remember what candy he handed us, but I do remember what happened next. He asked us to enter into his home, which is weird, but we were 13, so we didn't really think anything of it. And then he asked if he could take our photo. He said that he always liked to take photos of the kids every Halloween because he loved seeing the costumes. On one of his walls were a bunch of pictures of different random, unrelated children in Halloween costumes. At this point, even being a dumb 13-year-old, I was starting to get kinda creeped out. I figured it was best not to upset the man, and let him take the picture and then we could leave. So, he snaps the photo of us and then he pulls out a clipboard with a sheet of paper on it, with a bunch of names written in childish handwriting. He says that he likes the kids whose pics he's taken to sign their names so he can know who they are. At this point, we were both mega creeped out. We should have just run away, but we were too conditioned not to be rude. I decided to sign a fake name. He looked at the paper, looked back up at me and then down at the paper, and then he repeated the fake name that I had given, and I nodded. Luckily after that, he didn't do anything and we were free to leave, but it definitely creeped us both out. At the time, I thought he was just an eccentric guy, but as an adult, looking back on the story, it seems much more sinister. I'm so glad nothing bad happened to us, and hope nothing bad happened to any other kids. Halloween with all these costume kids trick-or-treating in the dark and minimal parental supervision could be a great opportunity for predators to get kids alone in their homes with no one knowing the kids' whereabouts. Please stay safe out there, and happy Halloween, everybody. It was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating. The previous year was my wife's, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter are ages 7 and 9. Usually, I stay on the street while my kids go up to the different houses to collect candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting, a main street in the neighborhood. Lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns. So, I became a bit distracted and I stopped watching my kids closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure and we carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I started to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask. It was kind of creepy, to be honest. I thought that maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, huh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me, while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded but didn't say anything. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes until suddenly, my kids came up to me and said that they wanted to go home. This surprised me as we hadn't been out for too long and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye at the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back at the man and his daughter were just standing there staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner and they were still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said that she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick-or-treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask had approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing is the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was creeping them out and they wanted to just get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what had happened. We made sure to check through all of their candy but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the cops or anything, since nothing really happened. But thinking back, I kind of regret that decision now.